When did Atlassian go from like, okay, so we're 13 people hanging out in this two-room office to like to the point where they're like, okay, I think we're gonna have a business here.
I think even when I started, they already had a business. If I remember correctly, they already made $1 million in revenue
Okay.
back then. So with 12 people, the and it just grew slow. It's this like frog in the hot water bath, right? Wait, the temperature gets higher, and you don't feel it because you're in the middle of it. It's just happens around you. But back then, it's hard to imagine, but back then most software was still shipped on CDs. I think DVDs just came out. Maybe they were out for a little while, but that's how software was distributed back then. And in terms of the competition, you had IBM and Rational on one end, and then Bugzilla on the other. And this is where Atlassian started because Mike and Scott, for the consulting business, they didn't want to pay for IBM or Rational. That didn't make any sense for two people. There was nothing in the middle that was appealing that they loved to use, and Bugzilla was just looked the same back then as it looks now. I think maybe it's a little bit improved.
Yeah,
But
I don't think it's evolved in 20 years.
It wasn't exactly a work of art. And so for Mike and Scott, they basically built their own tool and used that in their consulting business. And then they had a few customers asking them, it's like, hey, what are you using there? Like, can you recommend this? It's like, well, we built it ourselves. I was like, oh, well, do you guys sell it? And that's kind of like how they transitioned. It's basically, okay, well, maybe we can sell this and see. So, and price point, I think they just priced it incredibly cheap because they didn't know any better back then. Well, also compared to the competition, and also just to get it distributed because they didn't have the cost of distributing it. They said, oh, maybe we can let people download it from the internet. They had this experience with Orion web server. It's basically most commonly was installed in Tomcat. You had this one file that you install into your web server and spin it up, and you have your application running, which was pretty insane at the time and pretty fast. The onboarding at the time was considered super frictionless and fast.
Right. Yeah.